Um, I will perhaps start with the title itself of the topic. Why do we need to reconcile Hindutva with secularism in the first place? Why is secularism even remotely a construct that our worldview needs to accommodate? Because one of the questions that I'm trying to ask myself ever since I started talking about these topics is who sets the benchmarks? Why are these benchmarks relevant? Why are we trying to pass muster on the anvils of an imported benchmark and then trying to force fit it within our worldview? If Bharat has existed for thousands of years as a civilizational state or as a civilizational entity, if not a state, without the need for secularism or such a concept in the first place, what is it that has changed over the last few decades or centuries that this particular construct seems to have acquired so much of importance in our discourse? And I believe that perhaps there is still a certain element of lack of civilizational confidence to actually hit the reset button in a very strong way, which is to go back to factory settings and say, sorry, we don't need to discuss this, and it doesn't need to form part of the drawing board when I'm interested in creating a Republic 2.0. There's no point in trying to build a new story using the tools of the master instead of asking, how did we exist prior to that? That is precisely where I come from when it comes to decoloniality. I think, while I completely agree with the exposition of the history of secularism and its various variants that Professor Sharma has pointed out brilliantly, as long as we continue to use that word, its inherent semantics will continue to dog us. And the unfortunate reality is that that particular concept has come to represent a fundamental gulf or schism between the state and religion. And that needs to be done away with, at least given our geopolitical realities and our civilizational challenges. And therefore, I would agree more with Dr. Sahasrabuddhe's final pragmatic point that perhaps the wolf and the goat cannot hope to sit together at the same table unless the goat has gone through the process of wolfization or the wolf has become a goat in some way. And therefore, that hammering is necessary, that subduing is necessary. And there, I would not subscribe to the misplaced lofty heights of Vedantism. And if I were to go back to the root cause or the primary proponent of Advaita Vedanta, his adherence to Vedas and to the scripture is second to none. If anything, given the context of his movement, it was about re-establishing the supremacy of the Vedas as the primary pramana. With that being the very message of his life, I'm not able to subscribe to a wishy-washy kind of concept, which effectively says, I will accept every authority as the same and every authority as equal. I will not be able to. So I'm happy to see this as perhaps the ultimate, let's say, movement towards human evolution. I think we are significantly away from that. If anything, we have regressed significantly. And therefore, given the real-time challenges that we face in court, outside of it, in public discourse and political discourse, thanks to the weaponization of secularism, it is important to question its impact. Whatever may have been its original history, the manner in which it applies to this country, and the manner in which it has been weaponized to finish and wipe out indigenous non-Abrahamic societies needs to be seriously asked. We are not at the same level as an Abrahamic society. We don't operate in that way. And therefore, as an indigenous non-Abrahamic system, faith system, or a societal system, so to speak, I would approach any concept or word that has a Christian origin with the greatest of suspicions and with the greatest of cautions. And I would not even remotely touch it with a barge pole unless it proves itself to me. Assuming that the French model represents some kind of irreligious secularism, I would still disagree with that proposition in the first place because Enlightenment itself operates in a Christian template. It may have chosen to divorce itself from the optics of Christianity, but its approach is Christian, its values are Christian. The way it holds on to its dogma with fanaticism is Christian. And as long as that continues to be the case, I'm no fan of Enlightenment. Europe lived in dark ages, Bharat did not. I don't need to subscribe to the dark ages of Europe and treat it as the dark age of the rest of the world. Europe is not the world. So if that is the way to go about it, I wouldn't want to try and pass muster on the anvils of Western ideals. Our Rajas may have patronized multiple faith systems, multiple dharmic systems, let's be clear, dharmic systems, but that did not stop them from having the concept of a titular deity to which they owed their allegiance. Therefore, to accommodate others within my bosom, I don't need to give up what is mine, must be the first position. Until that position is accepted and until that is treated as a non-negotiable, that line in the sand is drawn very clearly and rigidly and firmly, with the power of force backing it. This discussion, in my humble opinion, may not help us address our existential challenges. From Jallikattu to Sabarimala to Padmanabha Swami Temple, what I see is nothing but weaponization of secularism at the hands of a constitutional organ in the name of the constitution against the civilization. And there I have no reason to arrive at a different conclusion whatsoever. So we may try as much as possible to somehow stitch together a cannibalized version of secularism, taking pieces from France, Ireland, Europe, America, so on and so forth, but it still reflects lack of originality. And as long as that remains the case, I don't think our Vishwaguru aspirations are worth having, because we don't seem to have the confidence to draw from our own principles. So, pluralism in the real world can function as long as there is a force at the core which holds everything together. Which means we may not be strictly a nation state in the European mold, but there must be a core nation that binds everyone together in one way or the other. I might as well give a very clear, perhaps a politically incorrect example. If the core Hindu identity were to assert itself strongly, I suspect the Khalistani movement wouldn't have asserted itself and wouldn't have been able to rear its head starting from the separate electorates of 1906, which is when the actual issue started. The Singh Sabha networks were established because they wanted a similar treatment. And that was being watered and nourished by the British. The core identity has refused to assert itself, which is exactly why when the core is not strong, just like an election, you're not going to cast your vote behind a weak candidate who doesn't trust himself, who doesn't back himself. The same logic equally applies itself to civilizational choice. When people realize that the core is not confident and is suffering from a bout of lack of confidence, then it will start mirroring itself in the identity of someone who is strong. So the Khalistani identity is closer, according to me, to the Wahhabi identity than the Hindu identity, in its tone, tenor, in its anti-Hinduism, and its iconoclasm. So the core needs to be established very clearly. Now the core can go about establishing itself through a rampage. That could be the European way of doing it, or that could be the Middle Eastern way of doing it. But we have evolved a process of Samanvaya. Samanvaya as a process requires two things: the silent, ever-present stick and the soft carrot that is constantly offered. That is perhaps the only way to deal with the situation. Which means that we say Hindutva at the heart of it does not care for secularism because that is not one of its priorities. Hindutva cares for survival of our way of life, our ways of life, all of which are influenced by culture. So between religion and culture, obviously there's a very clear nexus. And those religious systems that come from different cultural systems obviously cannot find it easy to survive here, except in the most extreme of circumstances, which is to seek refuge, which explains why Parsis and Jews have managed to survive here, because they had no other option. So if they had an option, would they have in peacetime coexisted with us the way they are? It's not as if they subscribe to sacred notions of cow otherwise. Why is it that they have managed to respect all those notions in this country? Because the circumstances in which they arrived here were very different. So I'm going to proceed on the basis that if we are to really chart a way forward, both constitutionally and civilizationally, the best way to do this is to remove and weed out the word secularism altogether, fully, and start afresh without any attempt at trying to force fit it in our future worldview or even the current worldview. I understand the game of trying to use the word and rework its meaning for the sake of optics. I also realize its serious limitations when it comes to your ability to argue beyond a point and defend your position beyond a point. Try defending the CAA on the anvils of secularism, and I will see if you can succeed in doing so. If you were to say that Bharat as a state does not have an identity of its own, but it can still choose to fashion a refugee policy which has a specific religious bent, you will never be able to do that. This is the direct implication of a theoretical flaw and its direct practical consequence. As long as you try to argue within these corners, you will tie yourself in greater knots. I'm coming purely from a negotiating perspective, a hard-nosed litigator who knows what is going to work in a negotiation and what will not. I don't wish to fight this particular battle for the civilization with secularism weighing me down like an albatross around my neck. It's a millstone that needs to be jumped as quickly as possible. Two, if I'm interested in creating a greater Pax Indica, I'm much more interested in creating a model, a feasible model for the rest of the world to emulate, rather than trying to co-opt them prematurely. The best way to convince people is by creating a workable model, proof of concept. Bharat already, in the manner that it exists, as a plural society, as a plural dharmic society, is already a proof of concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. But at the heart of that particular social experiment has been the concept of dharma. I will never extend the use of the word dharma or its connotations to non-Indic faith systems until they indicize themselves, which means Indian Judaism can perhaps be called an Indic faith system. The Parsis of Bharat could be treated as a separate form of Zoroastrianism, which is Indic in nature, not in their pre-form, in their pre-conquest form. Which is perhaps one of the reasons that I refuse to buy the myth called Indian Islam. Still, I'm not ready to buy that yet. Until these faith systems go through that indicization, and I don't think that is going to happen through dialogue. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen through dialogue. Germany needed 2 bitter lessons to calm down. Japan needed a massive lesson to calm down. Some people need a massive lesson because any attempt at dialogue, if it's seen as weakness, it's not going to help in any kind of reconciliation. So I don't want to use either Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam or Ekam Sadbhadavridanti, nothing of that sort, because all of these apply only to dharmic systems. These are not dharmic systems. They don't follow natural law. They don't believe in cosmological balance. They don't believe in reincarnation. They don't believe in karma. They don't believe in Varnashrama Dharma. They don't believe in any of these aspects. Such systems can be accommodated within the dharmic fold only to the peril of, at the expense of, the civilization and its fundamental principles. This is perhaps my limited submission here. I'm happy to take questions, but I'm very clear about one thing. It's okay to perhaps say a few things for the sake of optics from a different platform, but at least in these discussions, I think it's very, very important to get hard-nosed, because there must be some place where the hit reset button is considered seriously as an option, not just as something that can be considered in the realm of theory. I'll give you a simple example and I'll leave it at that. left to some members of unelected organs, and I leave it to people's imagination as to what I'm referring to and who I'm referring to. Every possible civilizational symbol and every possible Hindu symbol from every state institution will be wiped out. And I've heard them speak in their private discussions as to what exactly they think about this culture's, this land's culture and its faith system. When the mic is off. So I refuse to buy the possibility of coexistence as long as the other silently operates with the hope that one day you will convert. They are willing to bide their time and use every means possible. Trying to force fit secularism within the rubric of Hindutva is to start from a position of compromise and concession at a negotiation. That's always a losing position. The best way to negotiate in any situation is to hold on steadfast to your guns, metaphorically speaking, of course, from a position of intransigence, and then walk towards the middle ground if there is some kind of overture from the other side. If not, as a civilization, which is perhaps the last standing mothership of indigenous non-Abrahamic civilizations, which has a responsibility as far as the Asian future is concerned. We have the leadership of Asia because I don't think China can do it, not with its mindset, not with its disrespect for nature, not with its inability to understand. Anybody who can actually establish a base on our holiest of sites can never be trusted. So considering all this, we have a huge responsibility. I don't see the world moving towards the existence of a single religion. Pluralism, I certainly agree, is the way forward. But pluralism will go hand in hand with spheres of influence. You will have a Bharatiya Hindu sphere of influence. If Christianity develops or regrows a spine, it will find a base again. Its last standing goalpost or outpost is United States, which is going through a fantastic phase of implosion while I watch it with Coke and popcorn. And therefore, today, effectively, you're looking at the expanding influence of one particular identity with its epicenter, with two epicenters in the Middle East. Pluralism is not the response to this. Pluralism is perhaps the final culmination. First response is the creation of a massive sphere of influence in the immediate neighborhood. And then, perhaps in the hope that either there is a peaceful way out. If not, you must be ready. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all those very clear remarks and clear viewpoint, which essentially, I think to me, it means that now be ready for a final war. Because the way spheres of influence of others, the Chinese, the Middle East, etc.
We can disagree with Samuel Huntington as much as he wants, but I think he's
right. Okay. So the clash of civilizations is coming. So I think we'll open now for some.
Yeah.
I would like, yeah, sure, absolutely, yeah. It's a fantastic.
Some of the points.
Yes.
Some of the points.
Mike, please.
Okay. So the first point is that basically the paper is useless. Right? In the sense. So, well, I would urge that it has some relevance because we are living with a colonized mentality. And so, in fact, this achieves partly the goal of decolonization by indicating the term we would have used for our own approach to our diversity. The second point I would like to make is about Shankara and his reliance on the Veda, which is absolutely correct. But what I find intriguing in Shankara is that he also uses Anubhava as a very important category. And if we take that into account, then there's a very interesting coincidence between a statement in Bhartrihari, where he says, the ultimate test of spiritual truth is Swarbuddhi Manaya. The only test of it is your own experience. And Shankara says in his commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, Katham Ekasya, how you can challenge the experience of someone, Katham Ekasya Swahridaya Pratyam, Brahma Vedanam Sharir Dharanam Cha. That is, I myself have this experience, How can anybody challenge it? So we have this commitment to the Veda, but we also have these other windows which enable us to reach out to others and a broader platform. The third point is about the need for a code with pluralism. I would prefer the use of the word anchor. So that for our religious literature, it's profuse, profound, prolific, but it always brought in some connection with the Veda. Fifth Veda, Tamil Veda, Jivan Veda, sort of. And that serves as an anchor, stabilizing, as a stabilizing influence on that pluralism. Otherwise, it will just become dispersed and disintegrated. Yeah, okay. We can pursue these points further. Now, the one about Sikh, the Sikh example is very interesting. And I would connect that to a particular development which has emerged in my study of the situation, that the Shiromani Universal Power Committee's Act actually contains an expression which I would consider indicates the actual influence, as you pointed out, of the Western concept of religion on us. There are two examples of this in modern India, in Dr. Ambedkar and in the Sikh dispensation under the committee, where it says that a Sikh is one who believes in the 10 Gurus and who believes in the Guru Granth Sahib and everything, and who follows no other religion. This is an Indic, who follows no other religion. Similarly, in the case of Ambedkar, Dr. Ambedkar, when he led his people into Buddhism, apart from the three refugees, he also made them renounce various Hindu gods. This is totally un-Buddhist. In fact, there are examples from the canon, this canon, where a Jain, actually two Jains, offered to become lay followers of the Buddha when they are convinced of his teaching. The Buddha asked them, will you continue to patronize the Jain community after becoming a follower? And when they say yes, only then he accepts them. So this is the litmus test. The other, if you reject the other, you are indifferent to the other is fine. You transcend the other is fine. But if you reject the other, you are in trouble with the Indic point of view. Okay, about the Zoroastrian and the Jews. Now, I would argue, though, okay, we'll revise my position later on, but my preliminary position is that Zoroastrians and the Jews are not perceived as problems by us because they do not convert. So the real test is whether you convert somebody else or not. And as opposed to the numbers, is it a qualitative thing or a quantitative thing? This is what we have to decide. I never looked at it from the point of view just indicated by Sai Deepak, that it might be because of the numbers. I always thought that because they did not see concept in this, therefore they were accepted. Okay, about Asia's past and the role of China in that, a very interesting point, because I would have normally included China, but it is pre-communist China which serves as a model, but not post-communist China. So otherwise we would have said that India represents the dharmic worldview and Japan continues to represent it. Pre-communist China also represents it. So there is this delicate issue of what to do with China. And therefore, in connection with Asia's past, and then we can claim that just as earlier on it was claimed in the case of secularism, that Europe's past is the world's future, we can now claim that Asia's past is the world's future. So pluralism. I think these are the short notes I made of our discussion.
Thank you.